Hello, welcome to our webinar today. Our topic is 3 reasons to track PMs to your customers. And we've got 2 presenters today. My name is Jacob Finley, I'm with Fullbay, and I'm with Chris O'Brien. Chris?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Love having you here. We got great feedback on the last webinar, so our plan is to deliver some great content and help you any way we can.
A couple quick housekeeping items. First of all, introducing ourselves. So my name is Jacob Finley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fullbay. CPA by trade, and have worked in the shop. Chris O'Brien brings a lot of fleet experience. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chris O'Brien. I've worked for Fullbay with Jacob for a few years now and have about 20 years of experience on the private fleet side. So I'm used to managing a large fleet of power units, truck drivers, multi-state, and with that comes a lot of maintenance experience and the repercussions of not doing good maintenance.
Look forward to hearing some of Chris's war stories today. Housekeeping here, in GoToWebinar, you'll notice over to the right side, you've got this panel thing, and yours may look a little bit different, but if you want to expand the size of that panel or make it smaller, there's a little red arrow you can click on. It'll make it bigger, and in that side panel, if you expand it, there is a place where you can ask us questions, and we hope to leave some time at the end for some questions. Feel free to put questions in there along the way, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. And just to test if that's working, if you guys wouldn't mind going in and checking your questions section there, expanding that, and just put in, how about the name of the state or province you guys are calling it from?
That'll work.
All right, we got some Texas. We have a test. This is where we ask questions, Roland, correct? Ohio, hey Luke. British Columbia, beautiful British Columbia, Pennsylvania, Ontario, Canada, New York, Washington, lots of great places here. Grand Junction. Okay, awesome. All right, so feel free to ask questions in there. We'll do our best to get to those. We apologize, we've got some construction work going on in the background, but hopefully you guys can hear us okay. All right. So diving in, we're also going to do a few of these polling questions, first of 3. And just to kind of get this kicked off, we want to ask, do you track PMs for your customers? Is that something you guys track for your customers? And I'm going to put this polling question up on the screen, and go ahead and answer that if you could. Do you track PMs for your customers? It looks like for a lot of you, that's a yes. It looks like 59% of you do track PMs for your customers. Sounds good. All right, hope to give you some insight here. So number 1, we're gonna give you 3 reasons to track PMs. There's a lot of good reasons. We're gonna focus in on these 3. Number 1 reason is, as a commercial repair shop, tracking PMs provides your shop steady business. Steady stream of business. And PMs, so tracking PMs, they happen on a regular schedule, either time-wise or mileage-wise or engine hours. And if you're really proactive about tracking these, it's the kind of thing you can forecast ahead of time. You can plan for employee vacations, you can schedule it when it's convenient for the customer, so on and so forth. Just philosophically, the most profitable shops that we deal with and that we interact with are the ones that are focused on tracking PMs, because at the end of the day, the second bullet point, you just can't build a steady business relying on catastrophic failures of your customers, unscheduled repairs. Chris?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Coming from the private fleet side, there's the last thing you want is to have catastrophic failures when you're under load or under contract with a set of clients, or you have a route that's across state lines. So it's super important to basically have a solid maintenance program to prevent these catastrophic repairs. For the shop, what is nice, we subcontracted and we took the shop in-house. When you have a bunch of tech standing around and you're just waiting for the next repair, waiting for the next call, you can't afford to maintain that. You can't afford to staff for that. You can't cover the hours. So having those PMs come in on off-peak hours or in certain days is really critical to keeping the shop steady. But more importantly, What you often see, and from a private fleet side, we wanted them to find everything. Believe it or not, majority of the larger fleets are going to want you to find the stuff. They expect a quick preventative maintenance check to be done while you're doing a basic wet service. And that's a great opportunity for a shop to upsell the job. And I don't mean like you're upselling needy things that people don't want, air fresheners and stuff like that, or the cabin filter, although a cabin filter is possible. But you're looking for the number one item you're looking for are DOT safety violations. So the truck's in there with a wet service, you're looking for anything DOT related or anything safety. Those are no-brainers to upsell the job. Not only gain confidence with your customer that you're looking out for them, looking out for their best interest, getting the truck in a healthy condition so that it'll make it to its next PM cycle.
Yeah, definitely. And let's get tactical, Chris. When you are, one of the things that we see a lot, and we built this into Fullbay, is how important it is to take care of these PMs when the truck is not being used, because you don't want to interrupt your customer's delivery schedule and so forth. I mean, the whole argument for not having unscheduled downtime is the ripple effect. Like when a truck goes down, you miss a delivery, you could, I remember when I was working in a shop, a truck went down at 3 a.m. and the ripple effect at the factory that the truck failed to make a delivery at lasted the entire day. And so it's just so painful for unscheduled downtime. For PMs, you want to go when the truck's not in use. So one of the things we built was you can, on each unit, in Fullbay, you can set up a schedule of what a typical week looks like for that specific truck. When, is Monday different than Tuesday? When is it typically in use and unavailable for repair? And then you leverage that schedule to send a technician out and line up. I mean, what do you think, Chris, is reasonable if you're going to line up several trucks to maybe do an oil change with?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Yeah. Thinking that you have to do all these in the shop, in some cases it is what you might have to do, right? Tie up a bunch of bays, have people shuttling back and forth. But if you have a mobile tech program or consider a mobile tech program, you can feasibly go out to a yard, private fleet, and start dropping oil on 4 trucks without any issue. So, I mean, you probably could get to 5. I've talked to a few people in the Midwest that 4 is about a magic number. You can start dropping oil on 4. By the time you're pulling your 4th plug, you're going back to the first one. If not, you throw in the 5th truck. You can really bang out a lot of PMs, and it's all the same. And usually these private fleets have the same brand, same make, same model, all kind of stacked up to next to each other. But yeah, tactically, 4 to 5 is what we typically see. If you're on a yard, you have to have the equipment, and then you obviously have PM kits for that. If you've got, if you're shuttling back and forth, if you got that dynamic and that dilemma going on, definitely encourage you to evaluate what it would take to put together a mobile guy to go on site. Good case in point, again, Midwest guy who uses Fullbay, active Fullbay user, loves the portal and the interaction with the customer. 30 grand a month. All he does is wet services for one major private fleet. He oversees a couple of yards. But the deal is, he's not doing wet services between 8 and 5 p.m. like banker's hours. He's showing up at 7 p.m. at night, and he's doing these till about 2 or 3 in the morning because these trucks are under load all the time. And when the trucks are slip seating and working 24/7, which is the case some of the times, then he's your guy coming in on Saturdays and Sundays. But he's banging out a ton. One guy, one tech, one truck, 30 grand a month, pure wet services. And he's picking up small incidentals, nothing heavy. Pretty amazing to do that with a private fleet and only have a customer in a couple of yards with one truck turning that kind of revenue.
Yeah, I was talking to an audience of non-truck shop owners a couple months ago, and we were talking about preventive maintenance. And I made this analogy that I guess was highly inappropriate for the situation, but I think it's a great analogy in that when you're a repair shop and you've got these customers, local fleets coming in, you want to act like a jealous girlfriend, those trucks. You don't want anybody else touching those trucks. And one of the benefits of tracking the PMs is you get to do the PMs and the repairs. Like through the inspections, you're finding the issues, so on and so forth. And it's so much easier to run a shop when you are confident no other mechanic has been touching that truck other than your own technicians, because when a warranty issue happens, you're confident, okay, that was us, right? Otherwise, there's a big question mark around that. And it goes to hurting your trust relationship with the customer. It makes it harder to satisfy the customer. So to the extent that you can just kind of wrap it up, and almost the best shops that we see are the ones that almost run like a country club, where they have a book of business, they're tracking the PMs, they're doing the repairs, and you almost don't need to do any sales and marketing at all, because you can't even take any more customers on. You've got, we've done the math, and it can vary, but some people will say for one technician, if you were to, this is something that some shops will do, they will dedicate a technician to a fleet. So that technician kind of owns the units in that fleet. If you do the math, if you're running about maybe 125, 150% efficiency, if you're up to that level, really highly efficient level, which you can get by lining up oil changes and so forth, it's about 70 or 80 power units per technician. And so if you do the math on how many power units your customers have, how many of them are you fully tracking the PMs on and doing all the repairs, then how many technicians you have, it really just boils down to a numbers game, how many power units your shop can handle. And just do the math, because at a decent efficiency north of 125%, your shop can be very profitable. And a key point to that is tracking preventive maintenance. So really, you can't ignore it. And it's the whole Stephen Covey argument between proactive and reactive, right? I mean, if you're focusing on unscheduled repairs, you're constantly reactive. The shop is kind of controlling you, but by tracking PMs and being proactive, you control your shop. You can forecast things. Things are a lot steadier.
It's a great point. And, a segment in for the steady business, we meet with a lot of mid-sized shops and some smaller shops as well. It's not always big shops that are out there. And an interesting point that you would think that everybody has a filter program. Well, if you're not in the PM business, you can't go cut a deal with Baldwin or Fleet Guard or Wix or whoever you're using to get a program. You've got all of these, fly-by-night repairs going on, or you've never even thought of a filter program. With a good maintenance program with a few different customers, you could start to predict and forecast the amount of filter use that you would have. Go out, cut a deal. And just a case in point, a B99 filter. Let's take a cat oil filter, B99. You go out to Napa, and maybe retail on this thing is 18 to 22 bucks. If you buy it every time you do the oil change, maybe with your discount at Napa, you're going to buy it for 14 bucks. Maybe you buy it for 16, depending on your shop's discount rate. But if you cut a deal directly with Baldwin, because you've got some a fair amount of fleets that you're managing, or a decent volume that you can predict and you can negotiate with them, there's multiple shops under the Fullbay umbrella that are buying B99 filters in the $6 range. Now, look at that kind of profit margin when you're looking at managing PMs and buying filters at $6, and you're selling them or billing them out to the customer between 18 and 22. Your 3x margin on a filter, whereas if you're just doing it from a catastrophic road failure or just an ad hoc failure, you're not getting the same margin you could get. And if you don't have the volume, you're not going to get the deal.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. And just talking about some of the exceptions here, we're not making the argument that you necessarily turn into a lube shop. We're not saying that. We're saying take over as much of the repair process as you can. We're not necessarily saying start doing in-frames. I mean, you're still going to sublet some of that heavy work out. And in fact, that's one of the arguments for doing PMs, because when you look at the toll on a technician for doing a major repair, maybe it's a 24-hour job. Maybe they're taking 2-3 days to do a repair. They're not just out of commission for those 2 or 3 days while they're doing the work. They may take a couple days just to recover from the physical toll of doing a major repair. So to the extent that you can get ahead of that stuff and prevent the major problems from happening in the first place, just another benefit. I mean, it benefits your technicians too.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right.
So we got another polling question.
On to the next polling question here. And let's see. Next polling question. Do you have customers that tell you when your PMs are due? I'm going to launch this thing here. So let's see what the results are here.
I don't know if this helps, but just imagine that I'm the private fleet tracking it, because you don't have tracking tools or you're not using a tracking system. and they're the ones calling you. I'm calling you saying, I got 2 more trucks ready. I got 2 more. How many of you get your PMs that way?
Close the poll and share the results here. So it looks like about 85% of you do have customers that are telling you when PMs are due, which is pretty consistent. And one of the things that we see a lot is that the third party fleets like ARI, Donlen, Wheels, these guys, Warner Fleet, will do their best to stay on top of tracking the PMs, but even they don't necessarily do a great job. It's the shop that's actually there reading the odometer and the engine hours and so forth that has the best information and can predict the PMs. So the ideal is to have the customer being able to track that internally, but this is a good segue into our next tip. So
Absolutely.
Number 2.
So smaller fleets are terrible at tracking PMs. Interesting facts. I think, Jacob, you were recently at a big conference and did some statistical analysis with a group on tracking PMs, larger fleets tracking, smaller fleets tracking. And it's kind of interesting. Coming from a larger fleet, we had a safety director. We had some folks behind us and some revenue that we basically built an infrastructure that we had bodies. And not every private fleet has a bunch of bodies laying around. Usually what's going on at the smaller ones, everybody's working. They're drivers, they're producing revenue, they're on loads, there's a couple of supervisors, maybe a dispatcher. There's just not an infrastructure for them. And so what's interesting, I think, Jacob, you found some stuff about smaller fleets and the statistics, right?
Yeah, by the way, I apologize. I just shared my screen. So you missed an awesome slide for tip 1, but here we are on tip 2. Yeah, the vast majority of the trucks on the road are smaller fleets. And what the data shows is, so you get pulled over to the side of the road for a DOT safety inspection. It happens all the time. It happens to everybody. A certain percentage of those inspections result in an out-of-service violation. And what we found was that the smaller the fleet, the larger the percent of those inspections that resulted in the truck going out of service. Not for driver issues, but for maintenance issues with the truck. Another thing we found was that the fatality rate per power unit, the fatality rate actually increases the smaller the fleet gets. And so in essence, what the data shows is the smaller fleets are the ones involved in most fatalities. I apologize, the fatality rate goes up as the out of service percentage goes up. So by extension, smaller fleet, higher fatality rate per power unit. The data bears that out. It's actually a significant correlation. And we'll get to that, more of that in number 3, but not tracking PMs for these fleets costs them a lot of money.
And downtime, I think that's what one of the things that I found. If you're not tracking the PM, or you can't track the PM, then basically, if you're a small fleet, you're carrying freight from one end of the country to the other, you can't afford to be down. You're either going to start running illegal on your hours of service. All kinds of different ripple effects are going to happen. But at the same time, you're going to be an unreliable carrier. And maybe what you don't have are the tools. One of the things that I think are fascinating is that with Fullbay, and one of the things that I like, just coming from the private fleet, is that with the Fullbay software, there's a customer portal, and you get direct access to see this information.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you don't have that safety director, you don't have that infrastructure. Basically, what the shop can do is leverage the customer portal, leverage the fleet reports that we have, build out some preventative maintenance schedules for the end customer, big or small, and then share through transparency and give a full 360 about, from all the repair history on the truck, but more importantly, where are their PMs at and when are they due?
Yeah.
What's also neat is inside of the setup on the PMs, you can go into a unit level, and maybe you don't see the truck very often. You can start to predict. There's a field in there to predict if you're tracking by miles. This truck drives 300 miles a day. Well, then what we're going to say is if that's on a PM interval of, every 20,000 or 25,000 miles, change the oil, whatever you're tracking, if it's synthetic or non-synthetic, you set that interval, and we're going to assume as every day clicks by, 300 miles are put on the truck, so you don't have to rely on, the manual touch that isn't likely to happen in every case.
Yeah.
So we can do proactive prediction, and then obviously, as you said, Jacob, as the technicians are seeing the trucks and doing the other repairs or general maintenance, you're keeping up on those basic things like DOT inspections, state inspections that come around once a year and you often forget about.
Cool. You know, talking about the customer portal, it's a really good benefit, obviously, and we talk about the ideal profile of a customer, right? A lot of times when I tell people what we do that are outside the industry, they assume that most of our customers are over-the-road truckers. But what a lot of people don't realize is that such a high percentage of commercial vehicles are local fleets that haul their own products. They're not carrier services for others. They're hauling their own product. They're performing some kind of a service. And those are the kind of customers that tend to have more money, more profit margin, because they're not making money off the truck directly. They're just trying to get their stuff from point A to point B, or performing some high margin service. And I sat down a short time ago with a Fortune 500 company that runs a fleet, and they are not a carrier, but they do have a very large fleet. And we went over the Fullbay customer portal with them, and their reaction was just, wow, that's exactly what we need. It shows all of the units, the locations. They've got trucks all over the country, exactly what PMs we're tracking. When was the last performed? When is it due next? How many are coming due? Very simple and straightforward. So that is when you're selling into fleets, to your local fleets, and building your shop and building it to this well-oiled machine, which should be the goal. Using the customer portal as a selling tool, that fleet report in the customer tool is powerful. I mean, not just a Fortune 500 company, but any small fleet, because we've got this picture here of and I would recommend, this is currently on my bedstand as reading material. This is the North American Standard Out of Service Criteria published by J.J. Keller, and you can get this off the website. But any shop, obviously you need to be fully qualified, and state by state you may need to get certification for this. But every shop should totally understand what the out of service criteria are for trucks, and they are required to comply, not just with DOT criteria, but they're required to have a preventive maintenance program. If you're operating commercial vehicles, you have to have a preventive maintenance program in place, and you have to have evidence that you're actually executing on that program. Yeah. And if I'm a smaller fleet, one of the reasons a smaller fleet is not great at tracking PMs is because I don't have a dedicated team to be on that. They're all multitasking. You do the best that you can, but especially the over the road guys, but even the the local furniture company that's got 20 units, they need help.
You know what's interesting too is talking to some of the smaller fleets and are working with them, subcontractors and stuff like that in distribution. They feel like they can't afford it, so they feel like, oh, if I team up with a shop and they start tracking my truck, they're just going to find all this stuff that's wrong, and I just want them to fix the safety stuff. I get it that the seat is torn. I get it that this is this other item's wrong, right, or damaged, and then they get into this frenzy that they don't have deep pockets. They can't make this happen, so just keep it out of the shop or try to track it on my own on a spreadsheet. And I think that one of the things that's neat is if we focus in as shop owners on addressing the DOT items and having a mechanism, again, just touting Fullbay here. Not all repairs have to be done to get the truck out, right? Not everything has to be done. And I'm just going to use a torn seat. There's so many different items, but if the seat is ripped, not a big deal, but maybe we want to keep that for a future repair. Maybe there's a marker light that's not a DOT required marker light. That's another common one. We used to run them all the time without all the marker lights running. You just had to have the legal marker lights running. And so if that's the case, leverage the pending repairs. You know this, but if you're doing an inspection, you find 10, 15 things, it's a smaller carrier and they're just interested in the DOT items, fix those, serve those up, but save the others, decline those repairs, and save all the work that you did knowing that this is out, this is out, this is out, and use that as another selling tool to get that client back in here. So maybe a couple of months go by, that they've had some time to rebuild the cash from the the $2,000 hit that they took at the shop. Maybe you reach back out to them, hey, it's been a few weeks, do you want to go ahead, or it's been a month, do you want to go ahead and swing back in here and get that item addressed? Do you want to bring that AC back in here and get it tuned up? Because we noticed that you did have a leak the last time you were in here, but you're running in cold country, so we ignored it this go around. The pending repairs are a phenomenal tool when you're doing preventative maintenance to get the truck back in, and then obviously get another cycle, another wet service done, et cetera.
So at the end of the day, the value proposition for the small fleets is, if I'm a shop and I'm selling to a fleet, the value proposition is, number one, I'm going to help you get compliant. I'm going to help you put in place a preventive maintenance program that makes sense, execute on it. And through the customer portal, you'll have the ability, if you have an on-site inspection, to show them, look, here's our program and here's the service history on these trucks. And I was talking to one of our state inspectors a couple weeks ago, going over the customer portal with them, and that's all they're looking for, really. I mean, it's going to vary by inspector. I mean, you never, sometimes these on-site audits are like IRS audits. If they want to find something, they're going to, right? But so much better than trying to track it in spreadsheets or paper, and especially in the portal. I mean, if you guys have ever gone into the customer portal, into a unit, the service history, there's a search box up there. You can literally just start typing. It filters the whole list down. You can immediately see what was done when. You can sort it by date, so on and so forth. So that's a big value proposition. The other major value proposition is you're going to lower the cost of running their fleet, because the less their fleet is going down, the more they're making money. And unscheduled repairs are much more expensive than preventive maintenance. It's a slam dunk argument. So the synergy here is that as a shop, you're going to be more profitable tracking PMs. Your technicians are going to live a better lifestyle. It's still hard work, but it's more predictive. You benefit, and then your customers benefit. Everybody makes more money. Right. It's amazing when you track PMs. And it's sitting there. And for those of you who are already on Fullbay, the tools are there. Hit up our implementation team, our training team. We've got preventive maintenance training. We can take you through and show you how this works. But in case you need that, it's a great tool.
Yeah, I think a couple of additional quick tips. Just we often get some questions. How do I know the cost of ownership for this piece of equipment, or how do I know what we've put into this thing? Whether you're the shop or you're the private fleet, you can download the service history. You can actually download the report right from the portal, or you can go to the customer file and download the closed repair order on repair type, by vehicle. So there's a bunch of rich data in there to help if someone's looking at cost of ownership. Sometimes at the end of the day, the shop is the best voice of reason. Get rid of the truck. It's time to get rid of the truck. It's been in the shop too much. You guys should probably buy another one. And that's also part of that partnership. I think that's one of the things I always liked was in private fleet, you team up with a great shop and it feels more like a partnership, and we're working together versus a transaction.
Right.
And I think that the tools that we have and we continue to build, and the way that you sell and leverage these tools could really change the business relationship that you have with these clients that are out there.
Yeah. So smaller fleets tend to be bad at tracking PMs. That's the perfect opportunity for an independent truck shop to step in. All right. Third and final polling question. Do you give your customers a better labor rate in exchange for tracking PMs? Launch this thing. I'm very curious on this. Okay, looks like we got a pretty good response here. I'm going to close that poll, share the results. So looks like about 2/3 of you do not, 10% do, and the rest it's not applicable, probably not tracking PM. So 2/3 don't. Setting your labor rates, you know, is a bit of an art. I mean, there's science to it, but one of the things that I've seen fleets do, and you know, we just have to come up with these polling questions, right? Because they're interesting. But something I thought that was really interesting was the shop, they would, in exchange for tracking the PMs, they gave them a little bit off on their labor rate across the board for all repairs, not just for PMs. Say, look, you know, this is your, you know, the through the door rate, the retail rate is X. In exchange for tracking the PMs, I'm going to give you a discount off the retail rate for any repair that you have. And if you let me track them and proactively do them, like proactively just send the technician out at night to do the oil changes as necessary, track the DOTs, get those done. I'll give you an even better labor rate if you want me to proactively do them and then just bill you for them. So something to think about on labor rates. And I mean, labor rate, setting your labor rate is a topic of its own discussion. There's some pretty cool stuff there, but something to think about.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is I often get a question, because we see a lot of shops. I get a question when you're setting up the PMs and trying to set up the pricing and the labor rate. A lot of young shops that are just kind of getting this going, trying to organize themselves around PMs. They think they have to compete with the truck stop or the quick lube oil change company. And I think that that's one of the things that when you're providing different services and tracking, I'm just not showing up, dropping some oil and just jetting off down the road. And the goal is not for you to just do this at a loss leader. Some shops do, because that's the only way to get business in your market, because everybody's doing PMs and you're just trying to fight your way in and you're hoping for the upsell.
Yeah.
But I will say there are a large percentage of shops that are teaming up with carriers and they're able to generate for a full service, I'd say $450 to $550 per truck. And some people gasp and say, that's a lot, we can't get that. It's amazing what reliability, uptime will get you. And so it's not all about just losing money on PMs. Just a quick note on that. It's not about giving away the farm, but there is something to be said about not trying to make a mint either, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last point. It's not all about the money.
There you go.
So we touched on this briefly, but the unfortunate fact is the smaller fleets do tend to be connected to more fatalities per power unit and higher out-of-service violations. Last week, I participated in, was that last week or the week before, in Fleet Check.
Yeah, last week.
This is a nationwide thing, and I was up in Flagstaff, Arizona with our Department of Public Safety, shadowing them on these inspections. And they do a great job, and a lot of drivers do a great job, but it is kind of shocking the state that some of these trucks are in that are driving down our highways next to us and with our families, maybe driving, just an SUV, which seems big, but next to a, Class 8 vehicle is nothing. And I remember in a former life, Chris and I worked together, and he mentioned this story about, when you're driving on the freeway with your family, you don't want to drive right next to a semi-truck, right? Obviously, you don't want to be in the blind spot, but all that has to happen is a kingpin fails and it veers in front of you, there's an explosion, and that's the end, right?
Yeah, it's kind of, and not to make light of it, but I often see people, if you're traveling cross country, they huddle up underneath the semi, if based on where the sun's setting, and they're just using the semi truck as a shade. And it just was kind of an interesting thing where just being around it for so many years. I'm not saying trucks are unsafe all over the place, but that's not the likely place to find a safety spot for you and your family, because you don't know what you don't know. We don't know how well these trucks are maintained. And I think that's where kind of trying to make a difference. So, you can have a voice, and we know everyone's got to turn a buck and make a profit to be able to have that voice and start to make a difference. But I do think that there's something that we all have to do as people in the industry, is to try to figure out another way to ensure or kind of get out a better or a different public message that trucks are safe and can be safe. And there's tools out there. There's tools like Fullbay that will help get these trucks safe, get these trucks compliant. There's really no excuse. There is no spreadsheet time anymore. There's no requirement to make it so manual. And there's just a lot more at stake out there than just making another buck for every mile you drive. There's an obligation.
So these drivers, if I'm a CDL driver, I'm required to do a walk-around inspection pre-trip and then a thorough post-trip inspection. And technically, they're supposed to last 15, 20 minutes at a minimum if they're really doing it thoroughly. At least that's what the inspectors will tell you. So that's really the last line of defense. Just because I have a CDL doesn't mean I'm doing that good
and
job.
I had a CDL, and I can tell you, when we dispatched, there are very few shops out there. There are very few carriers out there saying, let's dispatch the trucks 30 minutes late this morning.
Yeah.
So you're bringing guys in early, or you're haircutting it, saying you get 10 minutes, 8 minutes. I've seen that all over the industry. Local drivers, over-the-road drivers, and then what we would do as drivers, because all the way back in the day, you would come in early to make sure you did your thing. But not every driver's doing that, right?
You would hope they do, and you hope for the best. But in a lot of ways, independent truck shops are kind of the last line of defense before that truck is out on the road having a catastrophic failure. And the data shows that if we are better at maintaining these trucks and finding issues on inspections, push inspections, do inspections, not because you're trying to make a bunch of money, but because it's how you keep the truck on the road and up. And a really powerful side benefit to that is our highways are safer. I mean, who can actually make the difference? Definitely the drivers, but absolutely the repair shops can make a difference in keeping these trucks safe on the road and reducing the number of fatalities. Thousands of fatalities, several thousand fatalities every year involving heavy duty trucks, commercial vehicles. Not always the fault of the vehicle. A lot of it's driver error, but a good portion of those are related to poor safety, poor maintenance. We can make a difference there.
Yeah, I worked with, obviously, if you're ever in private fleet, or if you're in any type of fleet, and your company's got exposure, you got a brand, you're going to have a safety director of some sort, whether it's transportation safety director, company safety director. There's going to be a risk and compliance manager. There's going to be some sort of infrastructure in the larger companies. One of the things I've found is anytime that we're on an onboarding call, or we're in a management call or a review call, and it's private fleet, because sometimes we don't just have shops. They're private fleets and they're shops, or someone's trying to sell and get in. I've been asked to help demo Fullbay, to help land a larger fleet for a shop. But what's interesting is that the Fullbay portal isn't just one portal, one access. You can be at you can grant access to your client, to your end client. 10, 20, 30 people can have access to that portal. Now, obviously, that's probably not going to happen, but a critical step in there, if you're trying to land the PMs, show the customer portal, or make sure that the safety director or the risk manager is involved in the demonstration of what your shop's going to provide for free to their shop as part of tracking your safety and maintenance. And I guarantee you, if the safety director or risk manager can have the Fullbay portal on their phone in real time, run the fleet report from their phone driving around, it's hard to say no to. And I can tell you right now, we used to get the calls, and it's something that kept me up late at night. Anytime it rained in Arizona, it was bad. We were just horrible at driving in the rain. And it's not the semi-truck drivers, it's everybody. But when it rains in Arizona, we don't know what to do. We're in the desert. We're in the desert. We don't know what to do. So we have accidents. And every time it rained, I always, I couldn't sleep at night, and I would come in early. I would check on the trucks. I would check with the dispatch teams. I would call all the remote sites, whatever it took. And it's just kind of interesting that when something bad did happen, because it did, and it will happen out there, we had no mechanism for the safety person or for the transportation person who went on scene to kind of secure the accident and just, kind of work with DOT to sort out the mess, because these things get pretty messy. There was no way. There was a full panic. Every single transportation personnel was running around trying to find the files, the maintenance files. They were trying to just find everything to make sure that, especially if there was a fatality, was that truck inspected? How long ago was it? Was that driver legal? Did they have the right hours of service, the time off, etc.? They're just scouring those things. Your safety manager, right from the side of the road, as they're dispatching out, can go right into the portal and see if the inspections are current on the truck, on the phone, on the way to the accident.
Yeah,
it's a huge tool, and I strongly encourage anyone here who's not using that, sell that as get the PM, lock it up. Nobody's giving these tools away for free to other shops. Other shops are having to pay for them, or they're having to pay infrastructure at the private fleet. You can be a small shop, and just like I was telling you, one guy mobile truck invaded a very large fleet, took it over from a robust shop, and he did it all with a Fullbay. Yeah, 30 grand a month, one guy.
So safety first. It's not all about the money. We, all of us have family. and we want what's best for them. We have a role to play there in keeping the highway safe. We have a little bit of time for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to chat them down there in the window. Okay, show the last polling question. Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you give your customers a better labor rate? Here you go. Here's the last polling question. If you want to screen grab that. 10% do give a better labor rate. So that's something to think about there. Another question, what about DVIR? How can DVIR be handled? And I think the answer there is the customer portal, because a couple of years ago they changed the rules where the driver only has to fill out the DVIR if there's an issue. And what they would do, what I would recommend is if there's an issue, obviously fill out a form if you need that for your records, but go into the customer portal, go through the repair request, and it's going to show up on the shop immediately. So train your customers on that, and if appropriate, give the drivers access to that portal link so they can do those requests.
Yeah, and then we've got some great stuff that we've already spent some time scoping the DVIR. So one of the things that you guys can look forward to, and if all things go well, because we've got a lot of clients that are doing some professional services agreements, we're doing some custom builds for some folks, some major players and whatnot in the industry. But if everything goes as planned toward the end of fourth quarter, you'll see us launch something that helps you solve this and helps you give a different level of access to your end customer that I think everybody could use. Because I do think that the driver engagement, a lot of you have direct driver engagement, and the DVIR, if you can close the loop with the maintenance record, and if we were able to give you different options with signatures, that's going to help you. So look toward the end of fourth quarter for a delivery of that.
Another question, are you able to integrate ELD for tracking PMs? We're working on that. So the API connection to bring in the usage data of the truck, short of physically being with it, to feed in mileage, engine hours, maybe fault codes and so forth. Yep, we are working on that. Let's see. Similar question. What kind of PMs do we track? It's really, when you sign up for Fullbay, we've got 20 or so kind of canned PMs that you could use. But really, technically, you can track anything as a PM. I mean, I used to joke about, white plate replacement. It sounds lame, but that's a DOT item, and you need to be on a regular schedule, especially in a dry environment like we are in the Southwest. But theoretically, if you wanted to track, replacing the seat covers as a PM, you could track that in Fullbay. It'd be a little ridiculous, but anything you can think of. What's nice about it in the system is it's component based. So when you're setting up your unit types, you'll set up what PMs are typically tracked based on those unit types. So whenever you add a new unit of that type and you're tracking PMs for that customer, the PMs come over automatically and you're off to the races. It's really just a matter of putting in the last perform date and then you're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with some of the different types of PMs, I mean, think about your inspections, your standard wet services, et cetera. But one of the things that I'm seeing more and more is when you're buying new power equipment, these manufacturers have specific requirements for the maintenance program, and they want certain things on certain intervals. And so, kind of the old school approach of just setting a mileage, it's actually, they're giving you, if you have any of your clients that are buying new power equipment, strongly encourage you to get the maintenance program from them. I just set up a bunch of Kenworths Internationals. We just set up a bunch for a large carrier that just bought a bunch of new power and wanted to follow the rules that the manufacturer said to ensure that everything was covered under warranty.
So the question, do you recommend a separate service? This is in Fullbay, a service for each customer's unique PM service or a master shop PM service for each unit type, which is simpler to use in practice? I think it depends. I think the master tends to be simpler. The difference would come down to, especially if there's an inspection sheet or a list of procedures that you have to turn in. I know we used to run into this all the time with Airgas, where we had to turn in an inspection sheet with the invoice or they wouldn't pay us. And even when we turned it in, they said we didn't turn it in. So it's, you have to complete that inspection sheet. That may drive it to where you want to have a different service for each customer. But in general, if you're talking about like a DOT or just your generic wet service or dry service as a shop, you can keep it simple and just have it global. Chris, do you have anything?
Yeah, it's really how you manage it. So what I run into is two big scenarios. One is when you want to, let's say that I have 10,000 power units that I'm trying to manage, or even 1,000 power units that I'm trying to manage. And let's say they all have a different filter, or there's a varying filter that's going on, and you want to put together a PM, and you want to put parts on the PM. Sometimes I see shops, they prefer to set a global service like a wet service, and it's set up, and then at the power unit, each unit, go in and put all of the parts that are required for that specific PM. It's easy to do. It takes some time to set up, but if the power unit changes or you change your filters, you got to fingerprint every single one of those power units. So that's one of the things that that would concern me, is if you have a large volume of power units or equipment that you're trying to maintain, having global services and managing them at the unit level could be a lot of whirlwind, but also it could be very laser focused, very specific. What I see when you have runs of fleets where there's a pinch of a certain type of Freightliner, certain type of International, certain type of Peterbilt, greater than 2012, older than 2012, there's different scenarios where you could have a private fleet, like where I worked, we had large groups of trucks that was the same truck. There'd be 50 of them. There would be 100 of them. It's the same truck. We spec'd them. We were very diligent about spec'ing our equipment. When that happens, create a unit type. Create a unit type, set the unit type up. Now you can deploy that unit type and that PM off the unit type to thousands of units, hundreds of units. So instead of fingerprinting all those different units, you can create basically a unit type with a PM service tied to it, and then at that customer record, set those unit types up for those particular units. So.
Another question here. So in Fullbay, is there a way to combine a duplicate unit that has service history in both entries into one unit that shows the complete unit history? There is. On the unit, just go to, I believe, the details tab, and there's a button there to merge units. You just need to choose which is the successor unit, and it'll merge that together.
Yep.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Chris, talking about PMs. I always love talking about PMs. At the end of the day, we built Fullbay to be essentially a medical record for trucks, and we want to be able to handle everything that the shop needs to be a well-oiled machine, to be profitable, to get the owner and the management and the technicians home to their families and have a good life, make good money. But also we want to keep these trucks on the road safe, and really that's our mission. And we love talking to you guys. Thank you for attending our webinar today, and we're going to post a recording of it if you want to replay it. And hope you have a great day.